Hey, this is going to be a quick video, and I want to talk about the simplicity of life and what we're doing here and the things that we do every day to survive and why they're not the most complicated things and why everything we're doing is simplistic and it's redundant. Like we eat every day, we drink water, we drink some kind of thing to hydrate ourselves, we do our own little self-satisfaction or whatever we do for sex. We have sex or we do whatever we do to satisfy our sexual desires. We go to sleep and repeat the process over and over again. We eat to survive long enough to eat again, and hopefully in the meantime you did something to pass that time. And the same thing goes with sleeping. You sleep to regenerate your energy, and you do all this kind of stuff to make sure that you're prepared for the next day, that you can survive, and that you're well prepared. It's a rejuvenation technique that our body, this rejuvenation process of doing this thing over and over again. It's to help build our bodies up so that we can survive long enough to have sex and then reproduce. So what we're doing here is very simplistic. When you eat, all you're doing is you're consuming calories. You stuff something into your mouth and you chew on it if it requires chewing. And if you have teeth to chew, you taste it with your tongue, and your tongue is mostly a mechanism, an old mechanism that was used to detect things that were dangerous to eat, like poison. That's why we have this mechanism in our mouth to make sure that we can survive, because we didn't know what we were eating back in the old days, so we had to use our tongue to have at least some sort of recognition, at least partially recognize if we're eating something that's not necessarily safe for us. So we would use that, and now it almost in a way is an eccentric tool to use for eccentric forms of taste and and what people eat. And sometimes people eat and don't eat certain things, and it's something now that's creating more of a disparity in what people eat more than it is to detect if something's not healthy to eat at all, and it creates eccentric food tastes more than anything. And people take advantage of it in different ways. So all you're doing is you're tasting something to make sure it's safe to eat. Sort of like if you taste something like, oh, I think I taste oil in my food, you'd spit it out. Or you don't like the taste of it, you'd spit it out. Or you wouldn't want to eat it. You'd eat it and you learn your lesson, you wouldn't want to eat it again. So you eat it and you swallow it, and your body takes down the process of consuming the calories and the things that it needs out of the food, the nutrients that it needs out of the food, usually from compensation of not taking or eating something else. It's trying to make sure that it gets its daily amount of whatever it needs, and then it goes through the process of degrading the rest of the waste in your body, going through your intestines, your stomach. The acid breaks it down in the stomach, and each part of your digestive system goes down and breaks down different parts and nutrients, and it collects different things for your brain, for your brain to send to the rest of your body. And that's a process that goes over on and on until it goes through the small intestines, large intestines, and the stomach to begin with. And in the mouth, when the enzymes and your saliva break down the food, it collects certain things there as well, mostly to help break down the food. And then what you do is you defecate then, and the process happens over and over again. And the defecation is just the rest of the waste, either through drinking something or eating something. Sometimes you can drink something, and some of that can come out of the solid waste, and sometimes you can eat something and it can come out of the liquid waste. So like when you pee, sometimes it's something that from some kind of thing from the food that you may have eaten, and sometimes when you eat, sometimes it come out in liquid waste, and vice versa, like I mentioned. So all we're doing is we're chewing food, and at that point, the process that we're taking part in consciously, not a subconscious body mechanism that works on its own automatically, that works on its own, with the exception of failure. It works on its own. The only process that you feel like you have any control over is the chewing process, the tasting process that you can take any satisfaction out of, and the full process of your stomach getting full. And now that you've satisfied your hunger, it no longer matters to you until you buy time, until you get hungry again. So beyond the chewing and the swallowing, everything beyond that's irrelevant except the satisfaction that we gain from eating and drinking. And all the when I mentioned this example, it includes drinking as well, satisfying your thirst. And when you come to sex, all you're doing when you have sex is it's essentially an in out mechanism. That's all we're doing. You're going in and out, in out, in out, and it's essentially you're on your way in, and half the time you're on your way out. So you almost say, what's the point? You just keep going in to go out. You go in, and that's a good mechanism to describe life. That's all we're doing. We have to go in so we can come out. We come out so we can go in. It's about the self-feedback mechanism where we have to go in to go out to go in to go out, and that's all we can do over and over again. We create a problem of going in, then we come out to solve that problem, then we to solve the problem of not being in, we go in, being out, and then we go back in, and so on and so forth. And that's all we're doing over and over and over again. And that's the mechanism I'm talking about, especially when we know what exactly we're doing and how we can fight these mechanisms and how we can fight against this mechanism that's controlling us, and how we can minimize the effects, the negative effects of this kind of crude bodily process and game that we're playing in. And the game is to obviously make us survive long enough to reproduce. Then we become expendable in the eyes of the naturalistic process that we're living here on Earth, and we're not doing anything else. So I say once we reproduce, evolution or the evolution will keep us around long enough, based on things that would happen to begin with. You might get some kind of terminal illness, but once you reproduce, the mechanism which I wouldn't say mechanism, it assumes in a way most people are going to have kids when they're younger, and the mechanism sort of flushes itself out, flushes most of the people out. The older you get, the more expendable you become, but we've obviously fought that, and by standards today, a lot of people are having kids much later on in life, in their 30s, and sometimes even in their 40s, unfortunately, which isn't a safe thing to do, especially when it comes to the woman being at least 40 years old. Because it can obviously cause some birth defects, and that's not a good thing. But we're fighting this mechanism, and it's an automatic mechanism based off of psychology and the events that have happened in the past. And since no more evolution is happening, we're not playing by the same mechanism. But evolution, these processes that have controlled us for so long, haven't necessarily picked up on this. So we're still playing the same game, and we become expendable through an automatic process of the recognition that we used to have kids much earlier in life because our life expectancy was much shorter. So we're not following the same rules, and yet we're still a victim of the same mechanism that controlled the people in the past. We're only living longer and dying longer, and that's all we're doing. And so a life mechanism is a very simplistic game. It's a very simplistic mechanism, and we're not doing anything except having sex to reproduce, and sex itself, and doing all these other things, such as satisfying hungers that create a deprivation in us to begin with, so that we can satisfy them only to live long enough to satisfy them again, to survive long enough to reproduce. And evolution, or these processes, will obviously let us have more than one kid. They want to juice us as much as they can to see how much we can propagate this, how many children you can have. But it's a process that works on its own, and it's something that you're being forced into in a way based off these hungers and these deprivations that you're giving, such as sex. It's only a deprivation. It's a deprivation created by a physical process of it's essentially, a lot of it has to do with semen and the buildup of semen and the psychology behind that, and how it interacts with your sexual organs, your brain interacts with your sexual organs, and how that process works. A deprivation of incompleteness, especially when you're trying to find someone, and this idea of making fulfillment and making that one, the bond of one between you and someone else, is obviously the kid that you make, I guess, or the child that you make, and that's obviously something that the process is trying to do. It's trying to create one from two, and that's all we're doing here. And the process of sex, again, is nothing beyond an in-out mechanism to satisfy the reproductive mechanism that we've been adhering to all this time. I mean, how else would we be here if it weren't for that mechanism in and of itself? So we're doing nothing but satisfying libidos that subconsciously are for the point of propagating the species that we're a part of, and that's all we're doing. So I think I covered every point. Life is simplistic. There's nothing else going on here. We're eating, we're drinking, we're sleeping to survive long enough to make the mechanism strong enough. We taste food. All these things are to survive long enough to propagate. But from our point of view, it's not any of that. From our point of view, we just want to have sex to satisfy our libido, to be comfortable and satisfied, and not feel all this tension build up or this deprivation from a lack of eating food. And that's all we're doing when we're playing this game. So I think I covered every point, and I appreciate it. Until next time, goodbye.